The Supreme Court has unanimously sided with a Texas rancher who claims interstate construction flooded his ranch. It paves the way for him to seek compensation from the state as the case now goes back to the lower courts. Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law joins us now with the details. Roger, so good to have you with us today. Now, you covered this case with us after that court decision came down before it went to the Supreme Court. So let's start with a recap of the initial lawsuit and ruling.
Well, good to be with you, Tammy. And this is an important case. And actually, there have been two in the past week involving, I think, with potential to involve agriculture. Let me frame it that way. But the family involved here has been operating the same land for well over a century in South Texas. And they didn't have a problem with flooding until the state renovated a highway, as you indicated, and changed the surface water drainage. And in essence, that removed a dam. And so when tropical storms occurred, this was way down south on the Gulf, the water no longer drained into the Gulf of Mexico, and the farm was left flooded, destroying the crops, killed their cattle. And in essence, their farm had been turned into a retention pond. So they sued the state for a taking, and then the state removed it to federal court. And once it got to federal court, he wanted the trial, but the Fifth Circuit did.
Unfortunately, some technical difficulties. We will try and get back with Roger McEowen because obviously that is a very big case and it can have an impact on what other landowners are going through. That was Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law. Now, as we mentioned, the Supreme Court has unanimously sided with a Texas rancher who claims some interstate construction flooded his ranch. And so we were visiting with Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law, and he was bringing us up to date on that case. So if you don't mind, Roger, give us a quick recap of that case and ruling.
Sure. Well, the family involved here, Tammy, has farmed that same land for a century, and they didn't have any problem with flooding until the state came in and renovated a highway and changed the surface water drainage. Basically, what that did was turn the highway into a dam, and when the tropical storms occurred, the water wouldn't drain into the Gulf of Mexico and would flood the farm, destroyed all their crops, killed their cattle, and so basically that farm became a retention pond. So they sued the state for a taking. The state removed it to federal court, saying they didn't have any redress at the state level. Went to federal court, and they ultimately lost in the Fifth Circuit because the court said that the Fifth Amendment was not self-executing. In other words, there wasn't any way a private citizen could sue for damages, which is a really, really strange opinion that needed to be corrected. And so the Supreme Court took the case.
Right. So what happens now that the Supreme Court did side with that rancher?
Well, that's an interesting question. It was 9-0, and they remanded the case, and the question has been, where did they remand it to? Now, I've gotten clarification on that it's going to stay in the federal court system because the state of Texas changed their argument midstream and basically conceded to the U.S. Supreme Court that, yes, they could sue under the state constitution. So that keeps it in the federal system. It's a weird procedural aspect to the case. So that's where it goes. It's going to be back in the federal circuit. It's going to go back to the Fifth Circuit, and they're going to have to prove that they actually are entitled to damages and what those damages are. And I don't think that's going to be difficult for them.
Right. Very interesting. So does eminent domain play into any of this?
Well, constitutional rights don't usually come with a built-in cause of action that allows for private enforcement in courts. They're generally invoked defensively under some other source of law or offensively under an independent cause of action. And here, they were claiming that their case was an exception. You know, when you look at the Fifth Amendment, it says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. That would seem to me that is your remedy right there. That is self-executing in and of itself. I wish the Supreme Court would have gone that far to clearly state that it has been. They've nibbled at the hook a couple of times over the years, but they haven't clearly stated that. Maybe we'll get that in a future case. But I think ultimately the farmers will win this case. They'll get their damages. They'll get paid, but of course the damage has already been done.
Any other big takeaways for landowners in general?
Well, there was I think, in my view, a bigger property rights case actually decided last week by the U.S. Supreme Court, and perhaps we can address that in a subsequent show. And just last week, there was a swamp buster takings case that's been filed in federal court in Iowa.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, I remember you telling us about that one. Thank you. That's Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law. We appreciate that update.